Thank you, Brian. All right. Thank you. All right. Good morning, everybody. Good to be with you here today. So thank you, Brian, my friend Brian, for that nice introduction. I didn't see the hands. How many of you have a red drive? Okay. But here's a more important question. How many of you have bought Drive? Okay, good. So I had a new book out. I want to give you a taste of some of the ideas in it. It's called When, The Scientific Secrets of Perfect Timing, and the book is about timing. And I want to give you some ideas from it, or really just one slice of an idea that I think is going to be relevant to your work, particularly at startups, because you're always looking for an edge. You're always looking for a way to maximize your productivity, maximize your creativity. And so the big idea in this basket of research is this. We believe that timing is an art, but it's really a science. When we make all kinds of when decisions in our lives. When should we do certain kinds of work? When should we do other kinds of work? When should we exercise? When should we start a project? When should we abandon a project? And we make those decisions largely based on intuition and guesswork. And that's the wrong way to do it. It turns out that there is this incredible body of research out there across many, many disciplines, from economics to social psychology to anthropology to cognitive science to endocrinology to anesthesiology, literally dozens of fields where researchers are asking very similar questions. What is the effect of time of day on how we feel and how we behave and how we perform? How do beginnings affect our behavior? How do midpoints affect our behavior? How do endings affect our behavior? How do groups coordinate in time? How does the very way we think about time change how we behave? And if you go wide enough and deep enough into this research, you can begin to piece together the evidence to make your timing decisions in a smarter, shrewder, evidence-based way rather than do it by intuition and guesswork. Okay, so what I want to do here today is just give you, as I said, one slice of it, and I want to just give you what might be the most important slice. Because when we think about time, and this is a revelation to me, some of you might have already figured this out, certain things that we think of time as a natural phenomenon. And we think of things like units of time as equally natural. But a second, there's no naturalness to a second. It's something that human beings have totally made up. There's no naturalness to an hour. It's something that human beings have made up. There's no naturalness to a week. It's something that human beings have made up. But there is a naturalness to a day, right? Because we are on a planet, and that planet is turning ever so slowly. So the day is actually a real thing. And the day, the unit of the day, has some really interesting effects on who we are and what we do. And I want to give you a taste of some of that, and then also some takeaways. So what I want to do is give you two pieces of research. We're going to talk about how the hidden pattern of the day affects our mood, and then we're going to give you two studies on how it affects our performance, and then I'm going to tell you what to do about it. Got it? So the first study is, so the world of research is so interesting these days, in part because of new methodologies. So there's an emergence of, in certain kinds of research, basically using A/B testing to do scientific research, particularly in the social sciences. But also the rise of big data has been transformative in many, many ways, and we're just beginning. And so a couple of the studies that I want to tell you about use big data. The first one is this. So there's a program out there called the LIWC, the Linguistic Inventory Word Count. It's a program that analyzes text. So you can take giant amounts of text, throw it into this program, and it will analyze it. And among the ways that it will analyze it, it can measure the emotional content of the words. Happy, positive emotion, sad, negative emotion, you got it. So these researchers, so a lot of the researchers, even in the humanities now, are using these giant corpuses of text to analyze them in this, using advanced math and statistics and other kind of data analytics. These researchers at Cornell used a different corpus of text. They used tweets. They used a lot of tweets. In fact, they used a shitload of tweets, 500 million tweets, 500 million tweets, 500 million tweets, none of them from our president, 500 million tweets from 2.5 million users over in 84 countries. So just think about tweets as text. They put these messages into this program, and they measure the emotional content of the words, and then they plot it against time of day. Okay, so the question they're asking is, do our tweets reveal any kind of systematic change in mood over the course of the day? And here's what they found. Here's a chart for you. You betcha. What they saw was a peak, a trough, and a recovery. A peak, a trough, and a recovery. So we're actually doing pretty well here at 10 o'clock, right? We're on our way down, but we're doing pretty well. We'll be much lower after this is over, but we're in pretty good shape here, okay? A peak, a trough, and a recovery. That's how our mood changes. Give you another study here. Daniel Kahneman, the famous psychologist who won the Nobel Prize in economics, he has another methodology, something called the day reconstruction method, where people write down each hour what they're doing and how they feel about it. So I would be, if I use the DRM, I would be saying, 10:20 a.m., I'm at startup grind, I feel good, 10 out of 10. He did this, and he found the following pattern. This is a chart of net good mood. Net good mood. A peak, a trough, and a recovery. And over again, no matter the discipline, no matter the methodology, scientists are finding this pattern of mood over the course of a day. It goes up, it drops, and then it recovers. Over and over again, no matter the methodology, a peak, a trough, and a recovery. So that's mood. How does mood affect performance? Let me give you two examples of this. Other great research, also, one of which is big data. This is a study from NYU. It's a remarkable study. I think it's really relevant to companies as they contemplate their growth path. This study looked at earnings calls of public companies. Earnings calls of public companies, and you know what those are. So you have executives who are reporting earnings, projecting next quarter's earnings in these high-stakes encounters with analysts and journalists. These executives prepare for these calls. They're seasoned executives. They're well-rehearsed, and the stakes are very high. The good news here is that these calls are transcribed. And so the transcribed calls represent another giant body of text that you can analyze using these programs. These researchers looked at 26,000 earnings calls. Yeah, no, this is like the big in big data is significant here. 26,000 earnings calls, over 2,000 companies, 6.5 years. Measuring, once again, the emotional level, the emotional content of the words. Now, think about this for a second. You have seasoned executives, high-stakes encounters, well-prepared. Could the time of day have any effect on the mood, the affect of their conference calls? And the answer was yes, because why else would I be mentioning it, right? Here's what they found. Afternoon calls were more negative, irritable, and combative, leading to temporary stock mispricings for firms hosting calls later in the day. Now think about that for a second. That's pretty alarming, all right? They're leaking. So even if you control for the fundamentals, all right, if your factories have burned down, your earnings call is going to be a little negative, right? If you're on the brink of bankruptcy, it might be a little irritable. But if you control for fundamentals, calls in the afternoon were more negative and irritable than calls in the morning, to the point where it had an effect on the stock price. And I'm convinced there's somebody out there who has written a program to exploit this delta between the true price based on the fundamentals and the temporary mispricing. I'm convinced that someone is making a heck of a lot of money exploiting that difference. I'll give you another example. Let's talk about standardized test scores. Let's talk about standardized test scores. Let's talk about standardized. Oh, so what these researchers say, rarely do these academics want to give you any kind of actual guidance. But here they say, an important takeaway from our study for corporate executives is that communications with investors and probably other critical managerial decisions and negotiations should be conducted earlier in the day. This is a remarkable thing when academics actually give advice. But let's talk about standardized test scores in Denmark, because why not? And if you're curious, if you put into Google Images, standardized tests, Denmark, this is the picture you get. All right, so standardized tests in Denmark. Standardized tests in Denmark. Here in the States, we take standardized tests. When we were growing up, even today, on bubble forms with number 2 pencils, fed into Scantron. In Denmark, the students take tests different ways. They take tests on computers. However, the typical Danish school has more students than computers, so everybody can't take the test at the same time. As a consequence, they are randomly assigned to take tests at different times of the day. Some students take the test in the morning, some students take the test in the afternoon. Does that matter? The answer? Heck yeah! Heck yeah, it turns out that students who take the test in the afternoon score as if they've missed 2 weeks of school. Wow, thank you. Who said wow? Thank you for the wow. That's a wow. I agree with you. Think about that for a second. We make decisions on education policy based on standardized tests, and this kid who takes a test kids who take the test in the afternoon are scoring as if they've missed 2 weeks of school? That's alarming. I'll tell you what's more alarming. If we're making decisions about this kid based on her test scores, and it's lower simply because she took the test in the afternoon. So we got corporate communications, we've got education. Let's talk about something even more central, which is health. If you learn nothing else from our short session here today, learn this. Do not go to the hospital or schedule an important doctor's appointment in the afternoon. Period. Full stop, for reals. I'm not joking. Anesthesia errors, 4 times more likely for procedures that begin at 3 p.m. versus 9 a.m. You know what? It's 10:30 in the morning. Let's talk about colonoscopies, right? Colonoscopies. Doctors who do colonoscopies find half as many polyps in afternoon exams as they do in morning exams for the same population. Let's talk about hand washing in hospitals. I don't have this chart here, but I'll draw it for you. Here's hand washing in hospitals as the day proceeds. The vertical axis is the percentage of time, we're talking about nurses here, the percentage of time that nurses wash their hands when they have an obligation to do so. That's the vertical axis. The x-axis is time of day. Got it? So we want to be up here. Here's what the chart looks like. I should have brought it, but I'm going to draw it for you in midair. Here's what the chart looks like. Hand washing over time in hospitals. All right? Huge deterioration in hand washing in hospitals in the afternoon. So over and over and over again, what we see is that we do not perform at the same level at the same times of day. There are discernible, predictable patterns of how we feel and how we perform as the day goes on. The bad news is that most of this is invisible to us. The good news is there's something we can do about it. So I want to show you this chart here, which is going to lay out sort of the design principles in deciding when you should do certain kinds of work. Okay? Now, one thing to keep in mind here is that human beings have different, what are called chronotypes. Okay? Some of us wake up early and go to sleep early. Some of us wake up late and go to sleep late. Those are owls. People who wake up early and go to sleep early, those are larks. Most of us are kind of in the middle, what I call third birds. Most of us are more or less in the middle. But about 1 of 5 of us are strong night owls. Any big night owls in this audience? Yeah, the world is not constructed for you, unfortunately. It's sort of like, it's sort of akin to, I grew up in Columbus, Ohio in the 1970s. Obviously someone who's never been to Columbus. And it reminds me of the kids when I was growing up who were left-handed back in the 1970s. It's like, oh, sorry. I mean, some of you might not be old enough to remember this, but the desks were over here, and so if you're left-handed, you had to write like this. You didn't have scissors that worked for you. There's no way you could play catchers because there was no catcher's mitt that was left-handed. It's like, oh, sorry, you can't play catcher. And I think owls are that way today. So the point of all this is that most of us go through the day in this stage, peak, trough, recovery. Owls go through it in the reverse, recovery, trough, peak. Most of us have our peak in the morning, our trough in the mid-afternoon, and our recovery later in the day. But let's use this chart to figure out what to do when. Peak. During our peak, we should be doing analytic work. Analytic work that requires heads down, focus, and attention. What we know from the research is that that's the period during our peak, which again, for most of us is the morning, some of us it's much later in the day. That's when we are most vigilant. We're able to bat away distractions. That's when we should be doing heads down, focused work, writing a report, analyzing data, looking at strategic decisions. That's when we are best. In our peak, we're better at analytic work. During the trough, which again is the early afternoon, that dip here, that's not good for very much. That's when these medical errors occur. That's when a disproportionate number of car accidents occur. During that period, we should be doing our administrative work, answering our routine email, filling out our TPS reports, whatever it is. Put our administrative work then. During the recovery is a very interesting period because our mood has gone back up and we're less vigilant than during the peak. So just put that together. Higher mood, less vigilance, that makes it a very good time for brainstorming, for iterative work, right? When you want to do creative kinds of work, you don't want to be too vigilant. You want to be slightly disinhibited and a little bit looser. And so what we should be trying to do here is moving the right work to the right time. This chart gives you the design principles. It doesn't tell you precisely what time of day everybody should begin at 7:41 and end at 10:36, but that's analytic work in the peak, administrative work during the trough, insight work during the recovery. And so, so let's take a look at that, and then I'm going to give you 2 quick takeaways, and then I'll leave. I'm going to give you the startling factoid too. Time of day effects explain about 20% of the variance in human performance on workplace tasks. So that doesn't mean that timing is everything, but it means it's a big thing. Time of day effects are explaining why some people are performing higher than others. And the reason that they're underperforming is they're often doing the wrong work at the wrong time. Here are your takeaways. 1, we need to be much more deliberate and intentional about scheduling individual and team work. When people work often matters as much as what they do. This is very important. So when we think about things, so if you have your analytic peak in the morning, don't spend the time doing email. Don't do what I've done many days, where my peak is in the morning, I should be writing, and I say I'm just going to answer 4 emails, and then that turns into 43 emails, and then 6 ESPN highlight reels later, it's lunchtime and I haven't gotten anything done. More important, think about this for meetings, all right? Think about meetings. We have completely blown meetings. And the reason for that is that the only criterion we use when we schedule meetings is availability. We don't think, what kind of meeting is this? Is this a meeting that requires heads-down focus? Is this a meeting that requires brainstorming? Who's going to be at this meeting? When are they at their best? We only use availability. And the key point here is that we are very intentional in business about what we do, about how we do it, about who we do it with. But when it comes to when we do things, we say, that doesn't matter. And it matters, it matters, it matters, it matters. It doesn't matter more than who, what, or how, but it matters just as much. When you do things is a strategic decision. And the best thing you can do, where you can, move your analytic task during the peak, your insight task to the recovery, you're going to up your game. One final message here. Here's the most important thing. What we need to do is we need to be intentional. When it comes to scheduling, when it comes to when, we just sort of drift through. And how many of you have a to-do list? Ever have a to-do list, right? That's intentionality, right? That's intentionality. You're writing down what you're going to do. We need to be as intentional as in our when decision as we are in everything else. You do that, and you're going to do great work and maybe build the next great company. Thanks for your time.
Come here, Danny. Can we give this book away?
Yeah.
All right. Wait, Daniel.
Yeah.
I like to do so right now is our morning break, but I'd like to switch it up a little bit since we have 30 minutes till 11. I want to give this book away. Okay. So, I was thinking maybe we should reward the early risers or the night owls. Which one do you want to do? Because we can ask who went to bed the latest or who woke up the earliest. And then you just autograph it with their name.
Whatever you want, yeah.
All right, so what? Early riser?
But they're gonna lie. Yeah.
So what? So you want to do night owls?
No, let's do.
Let's do early.
Let's do. Who has a birthday today? Do you have an ID that shows that? Good. Let's give it to her for her birthday.
All right.
Yeah.
There we go. What's your name? There we go. Why don't you come up here?
Okay.
All right, well, we'll go break, okay?
Okay.
All right, great. Thank you very much.